Preparing, setting up. All right, I think we are live. That's awesome. Let's have a standards party.
Yay!
Yay! It is Tuesday, November the 5th, and we are having our bi-weekly standards working group meeting here at the ye old OpenJS Foundation. Are there any announcements we want to kick off the meeting with today? No? Okie doke.
So I think I missed after TPAC, but were we able to give a good update about our TPAC breakout or?
You know, we did have a small discussion about that, but I think it's worth revisiting because I was also hoping to give a update from TC53 of last week. So we could kind of do both.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess kind of on that note, Sindil, did you want to maybe also talk today about the proposal for a collab summit session?
Yep, sure, I can talk. Do you want to do it now or later in the meeting?
I guess we could do it at the end.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, since we did last meeting, we had a really productive meeting. We were able to merge in several some pull requests, just sort of kind of booting up the governance and everything, and so that's really great. So we'll be taking some additional steps today to move that stuff forward. But we start first with issue number 24 related to participation in TC53. Which Donovan had suggested. So the last meeting we were going to see about registering the foundation as an org with a delegate to TC53 and make sure that we had an awareness of what, if any, additional documents might be needed. I did discuss this with Patrick Luthi, who's our executive director for ECMA, and he sent along the appropriate forms, and those have been passed on to the executive director, Robin, again, and also to Michael Dolan for review and execution. Because TC53 is a royalty-free technical committee, we do have to we do have to sign an additional form. They're committing to like their RF policy. So I'm hoping that will not take too much time and that we can move forward, but they'd be very delighted to have us and all that. So that's the update on that front. Any questions or concerns about TC53 participation? It may also be worth pointing out that I think we have a handful of projects in the foundation we should probably reach out to who would be interested in the fact that we might be participating here. I'm thinking namely JavaScript and Node-RED. So if anybody here is super familiar with those project maintainers or those projects themselves and would be interested in carrying this message back to them, and that would be great. Okay, hearing no additional questions or anything like that, I guess we can move on to number 23. Which is starting to accept nominations for active members. I wonder if Sindil would like to bring this issue forward.
Yep, sure. I think we also discussed in the last meeting. So we wanted to call the members who wants to join in the standards meeting often, or just have their voice or just raise their voice and things like that. So we want to call them as an active member of this group. And there was also a discussion that happened, like who can we nominate as a person or nominate for a standards group. There was a discussion on the pull request number 35. I will post the link on the chat.
Yeah, 35.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm pasting the link on the document. So we had this discussion. We had a discussion, small discussion over there. How do you want to propose this entire thing? Who do you want to call as a regular member here? Who will be like regular member? My perspective is like regular member at any of the project in OpenJS Foundation would be assumed as a regular member over here also, or do we want to specify ourselves as a specific set of people as a regular member or active member for the group? How do you want to call it? So that's an open question that we need an answer. Any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
we have plenty of time. I think we should discuss.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think Emily had few points on this, but from my perspective, it's more or less, it's like the one who attend OpenJS meeting regularly, who's a regular member in the CPC or in standards. I think they both are eligible here. What do you think? What do you all think?
I'm just reading Emily's comments. I haven't had a chance to read those yet. So give me like 2 minutes and then. So I do think that it is going to be important just to the way the membership agreements with different standards organizations work, that there is if the people we send to represent the foundation aren't part of the foundation in some more apparent way, like they're regular members of the CPC or they're voting members or they're board members or something of that sort. There's got to be, there will have to be some kind of in the ECMA, they have an invited expert form. There may be, I think there's a kind of similar form for the W3C that basically says that this person has, the ability to contribute and they are contributing like their own ideas and content, and not that of their employer or that of their of the foundation itself. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything I don't know that we should require people are regular members of the CPC, because that's a lot of additional, I don't know, participation, but yeah, I'd be really curious I'd like to see this be something that you don't have to be a regular member of the CPC to do, but that's my 2 cents right now.
I guess one, maybe kind of one aspect that's worth capturing is kind of, aware of what's going on so that you can properly represent, kind of, you have to have a sense of the room and have a sense of who's interested in what, to be able to represent those interests. So maybe that's something that's worth capturing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. They need to be like invested in, you know, in representing the project somehow, and they have to be like aware of what, you know, some of the goals and concerns are of the foundation. I don't know how you assess that before, or I guess the other way of looking at it is like that might be something that's required for that person to take on a delegate role, but maybe isn't required for a person who just wants to come and learn about web standards, because that should also be like a thing that's okay here, right? Like, you know, I don't know.
I mean,
That makes sense. And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think those two things go hand in hand. I mean, traditionally, we've had like difficulty because there's a lot of projects and like you know, you can't really follow them super closely and everything. So it's the communication so that we know that we're representing the needs and the wants of the different projects. So I think getting people to come to this and discuss standards issues is like part of being able to have good delegation. But they do seem like sort of two different things. And
do we need a definition that, you know, somebody can look at it and say, yes, this person is and this person isn't? Or do we need a definition that lets people know, if you want to adopt this kind of role, this is kind of what you're committing to?
So I think Sindil's issue, if we go back to like that as a basis, is like nomination for active members, for people who can, like, you know, count themselves, you know, active and participatory in this work. And I think the bar for that should be lower than the bar for who gets, or who it has the responsibility of that like delegate, label. And I don't know how, I don't know if I'm describing that very well, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there's two different definitions here. Or maybe there's some other, yeah.
So I agree with you, Jerry. Like the bar will definitely be lower at this level. And for example, when compared with CPC, I think for standards group, the bar will be completely a little bit lower, I would say. But from my perspective, the definition of active members that we are looking for in that issue, I think if you define that, like that active member also includes someone from CPC or someone like the voting member, or someone belongs to the OpenJS Foundation. If you are defining active member of a standard group includes all those people, then the question arises whether the particular person knows what we have to do or what we have to do as a delegate or things like that. If that is there, if you're comfortable with that level, then I'm also fine with having those persons listed as an active member over here. We would say like anybody who attends CPC meeting or anybody who is like involved in CPC as a whole will be eligible to be a delegate here, or will be eligible to be an active member at standards group, something like that. We can put up that word, but my concern is more like whether it will be appropriate, whether everybody will accept towards that. If everybody is fine with that, then we can go ahead and word it like that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, like if this kind of, especially if this matches or maps pretty well to the current CPC membership structure, that's probably the easiest thing. So if we were to say, you know, that we don't, first off, right now, we don't have voting members. We just have, you know, regular members, and the people who are regular members of this org are the same people who are eligible to be regular or voting members of the other, of the CPC, then that's probably the simplest thing to move forward. And then we can define from there, like, what other kinds of participation we can create so that we have these spaces for like newcomers who aren't really like super active yet to like come and learn about standards and hopefully get more active that way. Because that would be my goal. More people.
Yeah, great. I would say yes for that. More people.
More people, plus one. People are awesome. And is this point of view kind of mapping to what you were thinking as well? I'm trying to make sure that I'm on the same. I want to be.
Yes, it kind of maps to what I'm thinking too. So it's like, yep.
Okay.
I would normally assume that there'll be more people, but one thing is like, we have to be confirmed that they also understand what we are trying to do as standards group. That's one thing. I think everybody understands that. So if not, then we would probably have to educate them or find a way to tell them that what we are trying to achieve. And that's basically it from my side.
So Mike, related now to your PR, does this help? Does this discussion help unblock anything on? Does this help unblock that PR at all? Let me see. Now it should be regular.
So, you know, I think my goal with the PR really was to just remove potential sources of confusion. Yeah. So I'm happy to retire it in favor of kind of, you know, basically anything. You know, but you know, I was just reading through the doc and I was confused as you know, because you know, the term meeting is used in two different ways. I don't really have a strong opinions on how to define members or what the policy should actually be.
I don't think your PR should be retired. I think it's a good point. And it's actually one of the things that makes participation in these organizations really challenging, is that there's a lot of words that are multiple times and to mean different things in multiple places and that kind of stuff. So I think we should keep it and just go from there. Yeah. Okay, so based on this discussion, let me go back to the issue. I've been on this PR. So we are good with the idea that nominations for membership in this working group match to the kind of membership description in the CPC. Yes, or is that?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So I think then we need a PR to describe that process, and then we can all do as we did with the other in the CPC, and just maybe do pull requests to add ourselves to the list of active members. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a plan. Mike, will you be interested in rewording it?
Sure, can do.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Okay. Getting started with this stuff is hard. All right. The next issue is define and document onboarding process for the representatives. And so this is another one that Sindil had opened. I don't think right now we have a, no, we don't have a related pull request to discuss. But we've been collecting different thoughts and ideas about what, you know, the assigned delegates' responsibilities might be, and what sorts of skills and things they need to have and do. Any other comments or thoughts on this, Sindil, since this was your issue?
No, I don't have any more comments because we discussed this on the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably draft a PR for this when I get some time. I'll draft a PR and then let's discuss this in the next meeting with that PR, if that is fine.
Okay, that sounds good. I also feel like that we'll get our active members figured out, and this is sort of like the next step after that anyway, so makes sense. Okie doke. And then the last issue tagged here for today is standards related travel budget clarification. So we have a, now we have a calendar. Actually, let's go take a look at that really quick, because I think there's some additions Brian wanted to add that may not be in. Let me go see. For number 28, PR number 28, kind of figuring out which different meetings are on the calendar for different standards bodies in 2020, or at least what's known for 2020. And these are things that we could possibly think to want to send someone to. What we don't have is, you know, like consensus in this group, which events we might want to send someone, you know, to represent the foundation in person for. And so we kind of need that so that we can say we plan to travel to X many events. And so we're going to ask for a budget of X much money from the foundation. The other way we could work it is we could just say, we'd like a budget of X many dollars, and we will figure out which events we want to go with that budget. Thoughts on either approach?
I think we discussed this in one of our previous meetings, that we would list down the necessary meetings that we have to be there. That mean the group presence of this group would mean absolute value to identify those meetings and mark them as a separate thing. Is that somewhat we discussed, or just in my mind?
I think that could be really good. I think the problem is I don't frankly know which ones we have to go to, you know, like for example, the W3C is really good. about making sure that the advisory council meetings, which are typically ones you expect all advisory council representatives to attend, are accessible via teleconference. So, different working groups may or may not be like set up to do that. So I'm just not sure if there's some that like are must attend, and if they're must attend, are they like must travel to?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention this when we were looking at the last issue, because there was a thing in there must be able to travel to meetings. A lot of these like don't require travel for regular participation. So yeah, I think this is tricky because also we have a lot of people who like wear many hats. So it's a little bit difficult to know preemptively unless we have people express interest in attending something that they're not already covered for. I don't know.
So, I mean, I think basically, and I should go back and see if we can figure out exactly what we spent last year on standards related travel, if we have that number. But I don't think that it was very much. I think it was certainly less than say $10,000. I would say that was probably because we sent just a few folks to TC39, and I don't think, Brian, you are our AC rep, but I don't think you were able to actually travel on our dime for AC meetings. Is that right?
Not while I was the AC rep.
Yeah.
Funny enough, but I was the acting AC rep in previous incarnations, and on a couple of those I did, but all of my travel for various years with the foundations has combined not amounted to probably $6,000.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think we're talking about a lot of money. So maybe the approach is just like a smaller dollar figure and just say this is what we anticipate this year.
I mean, maybe the thing to do is to set a goal for how many people we would like to fund.
Oh yeah.
So say like 2 people, 2 events, or 4 people, 2 events or something. And then, we review it and see if we're growing or shrinking or not. But it sounds like it's a reasonably small number asked to begin with. So it sounds like niching something out with a process to annually review that or something seems like a decent plan.
Okay.
Yep, that sounds great for me. Yeah. So, and also, like, for example, if somebody is near that location, then it makes sense to ask them to go. For example, I can visit most of the things that is happening on Europe. If you want to go, I can represent, so I can also do that stuff. And yeah, so we can decide on case-to-case basis.
Yeah, I think maybe so. I think maybe that, because Cindy, you did just also bring up like a super important point, which in some cases we may just want to think about this like in terms of the economics of sending people, and also like not to bring like the environment into this, but also like the climate impact, right? Of it's better to send people to, if there's a standards meeting in Boston, send person who's in Boston, or something like that. So as long as they're obviously qualified to represent. So okay, cool. All right, that sounds good. Those were the issues. Are there any other issues in the repository we want to discuss in our meeting, or do we want to hop to the ad hoc bits we discussed at the top of the hour? All right, ad hoc, love it. I guess let's start with the Collab Summit because it's the most, urgent, I suppose. Because it'll be here in like 5 weeks, 6 weeks, crazy town. Yeah, Sindel, you want to share your plan?
Yes, sure. Why not? So I was discussing this with Jerry about representing a standards group and then presenting something on behalf of standard group. And my main intention on that is like how people would benefit with standards group. That would be the core idea of the presentation. So that is the main aim of putting it forward. And then like, for example, what we want to achieve for a standard group and how will it benefit us, how will it benefit the people or the projects who are involved in OpenJS Foundation. So that is the main crux or core idea of the entire presentation that I was planning to do. Any thoughts on this? Any ideas, if you have, would be more than appreciated and welcome. But there are like two difficulties that I have. One is like my travel. It's very far, and also I have to get a visa. So those are the two things that is pending. But apart from that, I'm also interested to create this presentation, and anybody wants to present it, I'm also perfectly fine with that. So we can collaborate together. That's the whole intention of this entire idea.
So I don't know if people might hate this idea, but one of the things that I think is an obstacle for people participating is just sort of a lack of like prior experience or exposure really to what the process is like, because they've maybe never sat in a standards meeting and don't really know about what's going on or something like that. So this is my idea. What if we did a workshop where we basically led people through creating a faux standard so that they have they can kind of experience what that's like on something that doesn't at all matter, like, I don't know, a standard for a new fork standard or something. I don't know. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm fine with that. But for me, it's like so. Yeah. So I agree with the fact that we haven't done much here, and it would be great if we have something to showcase, and that's really a good point. I think we can also wait for that thing to happen, and then probably with that we can move forward, or else we can move forward with this workshop. But I think like I haven't been to Collab Summit before, so it's all I have no idea on how the things will move in there. So I'd leave it to you guys. I mean, leave it to you people to address that.
Well, I appreciate it. Polite silence there, like that. You're like, no, I don't want to do that.
I'm trying to imagine what it would be like without it winding up as like a Monty Python skit or something. How would you convey the sorts of like, are you just looking to here is what a standards meeting is like, or here is what it's like, here's what is like trying to get a standard done? Because that I think that is like the part that's really, really hard to appreciate, is like the time and the number of people and the number of ways that things can go wrong and when they can go wrong, and the reasons that they go wrong.
And I think it would just, I don't know, I love coming up with like fun, what I would perceive as fun. I'm gonna realize that's not
like if you compressed all of the things into a single meeting, it feels like it would be very comical. Because of like all of the different because you want to represent all of the different kind of aspects of it. But I would be curious to see like what you imagine, because I'm probably not imagining it the same way.
Well, I mean, to be fair, this
Could
was
be.
I just came up with just now, so I don't really have much
Okay.
of an. It was just sort of like this, like, you know, spaghetti at the wall suggestion. But you know, actually, it is probably one of those things that would be very hard to do in an hour. You know, you'd have to. So I will retract that idea, but reserve the right to present the idea.
But what you could do maybe is like look at the history, of one standard.
Oh yeah.
Like give that could be potentially compelling, like, because you would have the ability to touch on like a whole bunch of things, but you could press it and it, you know, you could simplify it without it being completely made up or misrepresentative. Yeah.
So
I don't know, that could be an interesting thing.
That's a better idea, Brian. Like maybe just presenting a case study or something, and you know, and have it be a case study from what we would consider like a good example of like positive collaboration and, you know, multi-stakeholder contribution and that kind of thing.
Right.
That's a good idea. That's a better idea than my idea, for sure. What do you think, Sindel?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so let's.
Well, I'm a little bit curious what Sindel had in mind, because he sort of pitched the idea of presenting a thing. So maybe he had some idea of what he was thinking, or.
I'd prefer to do it offline. Maybe I can message you. But it's very rough
Sure.
idea. I have no concrete idea, but it's just like very rough idea, rough thing that I had in my mind. But yeah,
Sure,
I can talk about that later if you want. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that was fun. In terms of ideas, we should save those for the future, even if we don't do any of that this time. But the TLDR is, let's definitely do a standards working group session, I think, and also Sindel, let me know if you need help with like the travel fund process too. So there's that. But. And Joe, I think Joe Seppi, who is on the call, Joe, you were going to reach out to the Collab Summit folks too about different sessions, right? For CPC.
Yeah, and standards was like one aspect of it that I thought we could, set aside some time for. I'm also open to it being its own session, but if we wanted to, I was going to try to get like a 2 or 3 block of time at the Collab Summit and then go through a few different areas of focus that the CPC looks at.
Okay, cool. All right. We are 10 till the top of the hour. I think, Brian, you brought up TPAC, and
yeah,
in September. Do you want to kind of, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I sent out an update about what happened there. I didn't see a lot of responses, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting that would be good for this group to discuss potentially is that in that meeting there was discussion about how standards move forward and the idea of polyfills being a critical aspect of things, and how historically they're like just very loosely go with something. They don't wind up in the same repository. They wind up getting bit rot or getting out of sync once enough stuff starts shipping. They're not linked in any way to the process. And I think, Jory, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe it was Dan Applequist from, was it Dan Applequist that suggested that potentially that was a thing that was solvable? I'm not sure where it originated actually.
Yeah,
now.
I think it did because, you know, I think you're right. Yes.
Yeah. So the W3C tag, the technical architecture group, had a finding about polyfills that they wrote about, like the importance of polyfills in the evolution of the web, and that they're encouraged to explore, and like exploring and experimenting is the thing that happens like more on our end, right? Like on the, like out in user land and libraries and things. And so the question was whether there should be some kind of partnership between those two worlds, where like specs could have a slot in them to actually list where the polyfill lives, and that the polyfills should probably belong in a place like the OpenJS Foundation. And Wendy Seltzer from W3C seemed to think that was a really interesting idea. And I'm curious for feedback, because that sounds really, really interesting to me, but I didn't get a whole lot of feedback. So that this is probably a good place to have that discussion a little bit more, because we're all concerned about the intersection of these things.
So it happens that another project, this is like totally in line with this work on this other project, which is a polyfill that we have in the foundation now, that I think would backfit this story. And so, you know, I think we're onto something here, because those types of projects, those polyfills, like, they have a kind of finite life, right? Where hopefully eventually we don't need the polyfill anymore, because now it's a standard that everybody's like, you know, incorporating and implementing and stuff. And so I think if we can kind of work on what that narrative is, then I think we have, like, there's a there, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's like a number of interesting challenges there too, because frequently something that begins as a polyfill for sort of the V0 of it. But then frequently, once we have a V0 kind of shipping in a lot of places, people begin caring less about the V0 part, and they care more about the V1 part. And like, this has presented a problem historically with a couple of things that were even pretty popular, that we just, they sort of just lost their maintainers and their connection with things. So
I was muted, sorry, my bad. What do we need to do to, you know, maybe kick this or refine this idea a little further and move forward?
Well, we need to know that somebody besides me is interested. I think Jory has expressed that she's also interested, but it would be really good if this group was supportive of that idea or not. It would be good to know, like, exploring that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So there was the suggestion that there were some people we should talk to. We should probably take an issue to start that. I guess that's probably me, or maybe me and Jory.
Yeah, I'll need to go back as I've traveled and slept since then, so I don't remember all of the details, but there's agenda notes, thankfully, for folks it was suggested we should reach out to, so we could circle back and maybe log that here on our standards working group repo and move forward that way.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other business before we wrap? Because we're basically at the top of the hour. None, hearing none. Okay, groovy. Then I thank you all so very much for joining today. And I'm going to end the